Hello, ladies, gentlemen, Steve Buscemi. So, I've made it a thing to myself that during this quarantine, instead of posting every other week like I was doing out of it, I would post every week. I was planning on posting a video of me reacting to the Riverdale musical episodes. I have it all filmed, I'm in the process of editing it, but it's taking forever and one single day. I still want to keep up the promise, of posting every week, but I literally don't know what to do. Because I was so sure that I was going to get the Riverdale video up by at least today, which is Friday the 7th. I don't know what day it is. It's quarantine. Sometimes it's the 8th. I literally don't even know. It could be Christmas. I have no idea what day it is. I'm breaking out a little bit. If you have a problem with that, feel free to go in each one of my cells and personally take out my PCOS, because I'd be down. I tried to make a day in the life of a girl in quarantine, a quarantine, if you will, and it was so boring because I literally do maybe like 4 things every single day, but then the majority of the time I'm just sitting by myself watching Chicken Run on Hulu. These chickens are organized. That's all I've gotten from this quarantine.
Let's go dance to pray. You taping? You can edit.
Anyways, so when I was thinking of what to film, I wanted something quick and easy that I can just film. I'm going to edit it a little bit on my iPad and then try to get it up by at least like maybe 1 in the morning. I used to be quite the fan fiction type gal. Honestly, better than actual literature. I mean, this really is actual literature. So one day last year, I found a fan fiction that just really shook me up, and I've read it to maybe like 3 of my friends, but I think it's honestly better than 50 Shades. I don't know why when I thought of my brain was like, let's throw out a really good book, and that's where my brain went. I found it. It's called Shrek X Bread by Patrick Star. The book cover almost brings me to tears. It's actually really beautiful. I don't know why this exists. First chapter. Bread's point of view. The loaf of bread sat in the kitchen waiting to be sliced and put in the toaster. He looked around the room wondering what kind of person lived in this house. It was a small hovel, shovel, I don't know what that says, in the middle of a swamp. The smell would be unbearable for most, but this particular loaf of bread likes the smell of onions and rotting liver. Don't we all, bread, don't we all? Suddenly, the door was slammed open and the loaf of bread heard a loud shout. "What are you doing in my swamp? I'm not going to attempt an Irish accent. If you want to hear an Irish accent, listen to Niall from One Direction." The loaf of bread was curious. Who could have such a beautiful voice? Was this the owner of this home? Would he eat the loaf of bread? Would he slice him up and put him in a burning toaster? The loaf of bread was excited to see what this mysterious creature would do to him. All of a sudden, the creature walked into the room, and the loaf of bread finally saw the face of... We love a good cliffhanger. Every good writer knows that cliffhangers keep the reader on edge. I think I'm on crack. Bread's point of view once more. Chapter 2. An ogre. The loaf of bread knew it. This was the most beautiful creature it had ever seen. The loaf of bread blushed. Self-conscious about his one true love, seeing it in his home, not knowing how it got there. Of course, it knew that Shrek wouldn't care how it looked. He knew they were soulmates. It was love at first sight. The loaf of bread couldn't help but imagine their wedding day with all of its friends weeping, seeing the loaf of bread get married to its one true love. That was a hit or miss. The writer should have said it's one true loaf, but I'm gonna let it slide. Stop it, the bread thought to itself. You just met him. You can't be picturing your wedding day already. But the bread couldn't help it. Seeing Shrek in his fabulous wedding gown, all his friends, the croissants, the donuts, Maybe even his brother Rye Bread would show up. And of course he can't forget Shrek's family too, Donkey, Puss in Boots, and his slutty ex-wife Fiona. It would be perfect. Shrek would become the loaf of bread's husband, and they would live happily ever after in the small hovel in the swamp. I'm almost moved to tears. That was really beautiful. Chapter 3, Switching It Up, Shrek's Point of View. Shrek was pissed off. Shrek was pissed off. He'd spent all day trying to get Lord Farquaad to leave him alone. Lord Farquaad kept coming to his house to try and convince him to be best friends, but Shrek didn't need a best friend. He was fine on his own. He didn't need anyone. That's what he kept telling himself. After being bullied back in high school, he didn't think anyone would ever want to be with him, much less be friends with him. When he met Fiona, he thought that changed. He could finally trust someone who loved him for who he is. Someone who loved him no matter what. Or at least that's what he thought. True stuff. He would never forget the day he found Fiona cheating on him. The day he walked in the door and saw her on the bed making out with the one and only Donkey. Donkey looked at Shrek straight in the eyes. He could see the anger building up inside of him. Get out of my swamp. Donkey quickly skedaddled out of there, and Shrek finally made eye contact with his once lover. She looked at him with worried eyes in fear that Shrek would never forgive her. Shrek, she said quietly, almost a whisper. He looked at her in the eye, trying to stay strong as he held back tears. You hurt me, Fiona. Get out of my swamp. She slowly made her way to the door and looked back at him a final time before leaving. Shrek sat down in his chair and finally let the tears roll down his face. He would never forget how he felt in that moment, and he sure as hell would never forgive her for what she did. Now that he was living on his own with no ring on his left hand, he was lonely. Sometimes he wishes he had forgiven her. Granted, she was a hoe. They were happy together. They would have a tiny ogre children playing in the swamp together, and someday they would have children, making Shrek a grandfather. Trying to get the thought of his slutty ex-wife out of his mind, he went to the kitchen to make some food. Little did he know, his life was about to change for the better. When he stepped into the kitchen, he finally saw it, the inanimate object that would change his life. Shrek ran over to the loaf of bread he didn't remember putting there. Did the bread break into his house? Was this a blessing from God? Whatever it was, Shrek was moved by the loaf of bread. He could already tell that they were soulmates. Hits home. Chapter 4. Warning. Very graphic content. Please do not read if you are under the age of 18. I'm 17, and like 4 months, I'm a rebel. Third person point of view. The bread was blushing, as much as a loaf of bread could. It waited for Shrek to reach the kitchen. That's when he would finally be with his lover. When Shrek reached the kitchen, he looked at the loaf of bread straight in the eye as he opened the cupboard and pulled out the toaster. Shrek slammed the toaster on the counter and forcefully plugged it into the socket on the wall. Shrek picked up a knife and slowly brought it down to the loaf of bread. He slowly pushed the knife down into the loaf of bread. The loaf of bread would have made noise, but it could not talk, as it is a loaf of bread. Shrek picked up the slice of bread that he cut off and brought it to the toaster. When he dropped the bread in the toaster, it could already feel the heat engulf it. The bread was in agony. It spent 2 whole minutes in that toaster, and it felt like ages, but suddenly the toaster popped up. It sent him flying out of the toaster. The bread looked down at its body, which was now crispy and a dark brown color. The bread was happy, and I hope Shrek liked it too. Wow. Saucy stuff. Chapter 5. This will be the last chapter. Bread's point of view. Shrek and the loaf of bread had been together for several years now. They were now standing at the altar at their wedding. The loaf of bread stared in awe as it saw its soon-to-be husband walking down the aisle. Shrek was wearing a beautiful gown. The bread would have teared up at the sight if it had tear ducts. When Shrek got to the end of the aisle, it looked at his lover with tears in his eyes and said, "I love you." The loaf of bread was overwhelmed with emotion. He could tell that his friends and family, and even the whore Fiona, supported their relationship. All of their friends knew they were in love. Do you, Shrek, take this bread to be your lawfully wedded spouse? I do. Do you, nameless loaf of bread, take Shrek to be your lawfully wedded husband? The loaf of bread did not respond, as it is a loaf of bread. I now pronounce you husband and bread. It just needed everyone to hear that, because the concept that someone sat down and wrote this gives me faith that the world is great. I hope you guys like this video. If you don't like my video, that truly sucks, because I'm probably the best thing that's ever gonna happen to you. Stay around my channel, because this video is really weird. It's not like the usual videos I made, but I literally had nothing to post tonight, so I literally pulled this out of my ass. But I think this is honestly a love story for the ages. Gives Notebook a run for its money, in my opinion. Bye guys.
You like jazz?